I had watched the moon right from the high ground for 11 years, and in all that time, my wolf had never once moved toward the ring below. This was not unusual. An alpha king is not required to participate in the rite. It is for unmated wolves of the pack, those who come forward to feel the bond pull and see if the moon answers. I watched because it was my duty to witness. I felt nothing because my wolf had decided, somewhere in the years after my father died and I took the throne at 22, that duty and feeling were different things, and that I was only obligated to the first. 11 years, 44 rites, 4 per season. I had watched unmated women stand in the circle of torchlight below and feel the pull or not feel it, pair or not pair, go home glad or go home alone. I had watched it the way you watch weather, present, attentive, not particularly moved. The 45th rite was different, and I knew it was different before I understood why. It was the depth of winter. The ceremony ground at Veldenmoor's heart, a great flat clearing ringed by standing stones that the pack had used for 6 generations, was lit by bonfire and torch, the snow packed down by boots and paws, the air sharp and smoke-threaded. The moon was full and direct overhead, which is what the rite requires. I was standing at the high ground where the alpha always stands, above the ring, high enough to see all of it. The gathered pack, the bonfire, the women in the inner ring, the men in the outer one, the elder warden in the center with the old words on her lips. I was watching the way I always watched. And then I saw her pushed. She was standing near the edge of the inner ring, not at the center where the willing ones usually cluster, but toward the outer margin, a little apart from the others. I had noticed her earlier without realizing I had. A woman in a gray wool cloak that had been mended at the hem, practical boots, dark hair pinned up without ceremony. She was not dressed to be seen. She was dressed to be present, which is a different thing, and the distinction registered somewhere in me before I could name it. The 2 men who pushed her were standing just inside the outer ring, pack members I recognized by their build and their standing. Brothers from the dyer's quarter, the younger sons of a wool merchant family who had always carried themselves as though their mediocrity were distinction. I had never liked them, particularly. I had not disliked them either, because until that moment they had not given me reason to form a view. The push was not violent. That is what made it so clear. It was casual, the deliberate, practiced ease of people who have done something many times before and have stopped thinking of it as cruelty. One of them leaned toward her and said something. The other laughed, and then the first one placed his hand flat on her shoulder and pressed her toward the edge of the ring, not a shove, just a steady pressure, the kind that says, "You don't belong here and we find that funny." She did not stumble. That was the first thing I noticed about her with any real attention. A lesser person would have stumbled, or looked around for someone to appeal to, or let the public nature of it bring heat to their face. She did none of these things. She absorbed the pressure with the solidity of someone who had been absorbing that kind of pressure for a long time, and she straightened, and she turned to go. Her head was up. Her back was straight. She was going to walk out of that ceremony ring with more dignity than anyone in it, and not one person was going to see her do it, because everyone was watching the center where the bond pull was strongest. I was watching her. And then the mark ignited. I had heard about the founding Luna's silver thread mark the way everyone in the Alpha line hears about it. As history, as legend, as the thing that happened in the time of the first Calder, 4 generations ago, when the bond between the Alpha line and its destined mate had been sealed with a visible sign, silver fire on the wrist, both his and hers, burning bright as a moon thread in the dark. The mark meant the true mate of the Alpha bloodline was present. It meant the bond was not a choice but a recognition, the pack line's oldest way of saying, "This one, no argument." It had not appeared in 4 generations. It appeared on her wrist as she turned to leave the ring. I am not a man given to impulse. I have governed a highland pack through 3 winters of fever, 2 territorial disputes and a succession crisis, and in all of that I have acted from calculation, not reaction. I am patient. I am controlled. My wolf, in 11 years of watching moonrights from the high ground, had never once told me to move. It told me now. Not gently. I want to be precise about this because the gentle telling, the slow recognition, the quiet settling was not what happened. What happened was total. A compass does not lean toward north, it snaps to it. That is what my wolf did. In the space between one breath and the next, it went from 11 years of silence to a certainty so complete it had no room for argument. The absence became a presence. A sound I had not known was missing filled the room. I was moving before I had decided to move. The pack parted as I came down from the high ground. They always do. An alpha king moving with purpose through a gathered pack is a thing the body recognizes before the mind does. People stepped aside not because they were told to, but because the air in front of me changed quality, and something in them understood that this was not a moment to be in the way of. I reached her before she cleared the ring. She had not run. Of course she had not run. She was walking with that same straight-backed composure, the gray cloak's mended hem brushing the packed snow, her hands, I noticed them now, as I came up beside her, stained at the fingers and knuckles with indigo, the particular deep blue of a dyer's trade. Her hands were the hands of a working woman, careful and capable, and the mark on the inside of her left wrist was burning silver against the dye-stained skin like a thread of moon pulled taut. She noticed me when I stepped in front of her. She stopped. She looked at the mark on her wrist, and then at me, and her expression, dignified, composed, the face of a woman who has decided not to let anything move her, shifted into something more honest. Confusion, and beneath that, the first edge of fear. "I don't know what this is," she said. Her voice was steady. Even that steadiness cost her something, I could see it. "I do," I said. She looked at me carefully. She was trying to read me the way a practical person reads a situation they don't understand, looking for the shape of it, the cause, the thing that explains it. "Tell me," she said, not a demand, simply the honest request of someone who needed information and was not going to pretend otherwise. I turned my own wrist up. The Alpha's seal, a mark that lives on every Alpha King of the Veldenmoor line, dark and dormant between bonds, was burning. Silver matching hers, the way a key matches a lock. I had not seen it lit in my lifetime. My father had described it to me once, in the way fathers describe things they have heard about but not witnessed. As a story, a legend, something that happened in the time of the first Calder. It was not a story. It was here now in the torchlight, both our wrists burning with the same silver thread. She stared at it, then at me, then at the mark on her own wrist again. The fear had not gone, but behind it something else was arriving, not quite belief, the preliminary of belief, the moment when a person's mind begins to stop fighting what their eyes are showing them. "What does it mean?" she said, though I suspected she already knew. "It means the bond chose," I said. 4 generations ago, the founding Luna's mark established the line. It only appears on the true mate of the Alpha bloodline. It has not appeared since her time. She looked at her wrist again. "I am a dyer's daughter," she said. "Yes," I said. "I have been passed over at this rite 3 times. I know." She was quiet for a moment, absorbing this, the strangeness of it, the scale of it, the absurdity that the thing her pack had decided she was not worth enough for had just chosen her in a way that admitted no argument. "Your brothers pushed you toward the edge of the ring," I said. "I saw it." Something shifted in her face. It was small, a tightening around the eyes, the way people look when they have chosen not to feel something and have almost succeeded. "They always do," she said. Quiet, not bitter. Simply factual, the way you state something that has been true for long enough that the truth of it no longer surprises you. I felt something change in me that was not my wolf. Something slower and more considered, from whatever part of me had remained, through 11 years of governance and duty, a man capable of anger on behalf of someone else. "Not again," I said. She looked at me. Not ever again, I said. Her name was Saren. I learned it from the warden, who came forward through the parted pack with the expression of a woman who has spent 60 years reading the bond signs, and has just seen one she thought she would never see in her lifetime. Elder Marin, she had been warden at Veldenmoor since before I was born, stood beside us, and looked at the matching marks with the careful satisfaction of someone seeing a very old promise kept. The silver thread bond, Marin said. The founding Luna's mark, I have read of it. I was not certain I believed it. She looked at Saren. You are Saren, daughter of the dyer Aldrich. I know your father's work. Yes, Saren said. She had not moved from where she stood. She was still holding herself with that composure. The one that had been built, I was beginning to understand, not from confidence but from long practice at not letting the things that hurt her show. Your wrist will burn until the bond is acknowledged, Marin said. It will not harm you, but it will not dim either. Saren looked at the silver thread on her wrist. How long has this mark been there? It has always been there, Marin said. Dormant. Waiting. The founding Luna's gift to her line was this. The true mate of the Alpha bloodline carries the mark from birth. It sleeps until the Alpha is near and the bond is ready to open. She paused. In your case, it chose a very public moment. It did, Saren said, and there was a dryness in her voice that was, I realized, humor. Quiet, contained, the kind of humor that people develop when the alternative is to let the absurdity of their situation overwhelm them. I liked her immediately and more for that. The pack had not moved. This is the thing about a gathered pack when something unprecedented happens. They do not disperse. They watch. 200 wolves standing in the torchlight on the ceremony ground, and not one of them had taken a step toward the edge of the clearing. They were watching me, and the woman with the silver thread mark on her wrist, and their faces held the full range of what 200 people feel when they witness something they will be telling their grandchildren about. Most of them, all, the quiet, genuine kind, the kind that comes not from spectacle but from recognition, the sense that something ancient has just done exactly what it was always meant to do. Some of them, the particular expression of people who have been wrong about something for a long time, and are now watching the evidence of that wrongness stand in the torchlight with its wrist on fire. Two of them the stepbrothers, Aldrich's stepsons, Bram and Corvin, wool merchants Get, the ones who had pushed her. They were standing where I had last seen them, at the edge of the outer ring, and their faces held something between disbelief and the first onset of understanding. Not guilt yet, but the precursor to it. The moment when you realize the thing you thought was inconsequential has turned out to matter enormously. I would deal with them. But not yet. There was something to do first. The old claim words of the Alpha line are not a ceremony. That distinction matters. A ceremony is a performance for witnesses. You speak the words because the pack needs to hear them, because the formality of the thing confers the thing's reality. The claim words are different. They are spoken because the bond already exists, and the words are the way the Alpha acknowledges it, not to the pack, but to the mate. The pack hears because they are present. That is secondary. I faced Saren. She faced me. Her hands were at her sides, those indigo-stained, capable hands, the silver mark burning on her left wrist. She was not trembling. I had half expected her to be trembling, given everything that had just happened in the span of a quarter hour. The push, the mark, the Alpha of Veldenmoor stopping in front of her, the warden naming the bond aloud, the entire pack watching. A person could be forgiven for trembling. She was not trembling. I want to ask you something, I said. She waited. The mark declared, I said. The bond is real, but I am not going to claim you because a mark appeared on your wrist and my pack is watching. I am going to ask you whether you will be claimed. I paused. These are different things. She was very still. You're asking me. Yes. The Alpha King of Veldenmoor is asking the dyer's daughter if she will accept a bond that her own wrist has already declared. Yes. Something moved across her face, not the composure, not the humor, but something underneath both of those, something she had been carrying behind them for a long time. Not grief exactly. The shape that grief leaves when it has been held in the chest long enough that it stops feeling like grief and starts feeling like the natural weight of things. Every year for 3 years, she said, I came to this rite and stood in this ring because I believed the bond was real. Because I believed the mark existed, and that it would know its own, and that what everyone said about me, that I was barren, that I was not worth a claim, that the bond had passed me by, was wrong. She paused. Every year for 3 years I went home alone, and every year I told myself I would not come back, and every year I came back because I could not make myself stop believing the thing I believed. She looked at her wrist. And now here it is, she said, the thing I believed. Yes, I said. She looked at me. Then yes, she said, I will be claimed. The old words are 6 lines. They are spoken in the pack's ancestral tongue, which every Alpha King learns at his father's knee for exactly this purpose, and rarely uses for any other. I had learned them at my father's knee, and never expected to use them. I spoke them to Saren in the torchlight on the packed snow of the ceremony ground, with the bonfire burning behind us, and 200 wolves watching, and the silver thread marks on both our wrists burning brighter with each line, until by the last word they were visible to the outermost edge of the ring. When I finished, the mark sealed. Not dramatically, not with a crack of sound or a flash of light. The silver thread simply became steady from burning to constant, the way a flame settles when the wind stops, permanent, quiet, there. In the silence that followed, I heard one sound before the pack began to move, the creak of knees hitting snow. They bowed. It is what a pack does when the Alpha Bond is declared. It is not submission but acknowledgement, the old gesture that says, we witness this. We receive it. It is real. 200 wolves kneeling in the Veldenmoor snow, their heads inclined toward the woman in the gray cloak with the indigo-stained hands. Every one of them. Including, and I watched this with a particular deliberate attention, Bram and Corvin. They were slower than the rest. I noticed it. I think Saren noticed it too, because I felt her hand tighten slightly in mine. I had taken her hand after the 6th word as the old form requires, and she had not let go, and her gaze moved briefly in their direction. The 2 men who had pushed her to the edge of the ring, who had laughed, who had done this thing, casually and often, because they had decided she was not worth the consideration of being careful. They knelt. It was not graceful. It was the kneeling of men who have understood very suddenly that the thing they treated as nothing has turned out to be everything, and that 200 of their packmates are witnesses to their having been wrong about it in the most public and permanent way possible. I would speak to them. Not tonight. The bond night is not the time for correction. It is the time for the bond. But I would speak to them, and what I said would be precise and unhurried, and would not leave ambiguity about what I expected from anyone in this pack regarding Saren, going forward, for the rest of their lives in Veldenmoor. For now they knelt. Saren did not look at them for long. A breath, maybe 2. Enough to see that they were there, that they had witnessed it, that the thing they had made so small had been made unmistakably large. Then she turned her face back to me. I do not know exactly what I looked like in that moment, but whatever it was, something in her composure, the long-practiced, carefully maintained composure that I suspected had kept her whole through 3 years of being passed over and pushed to the edges of things, relaxed. Not collapsed. Not dissolved. Simply relaxed, the way a thing held in tension relaxes when the thing it was braced against is gone. The warden will have questions for me, she said. She will, I agreed. And the pack council? Yes. And presumably my stepbrothers at some point. I will handle your stepbrothers, I said. She looked at me. What will you say to them? The truth, I said. That what they did was seen, that it will not happen again, that they owe you more than an apology, but that the apology is where they will begin. She was quiet for a moment. I don't need an apology, she said. I don't need anything from them. I know, I said. That is precisely why they will give one. She looked at me for a long moment, reading that, the distinction between what she needed and what was right, and why the second mattered even when the first was gone. Then something moved in her face that I was beginning to understand was the thing she let herself feel when she had stopped performing composure. A warmth, genuine and unguarded. "You're not what I expected," she said. "What did you expect?" "An alpha king watching from the high ground," she said. "Someone who watched and didn't come down." I thought about that. 11 years of watching from the high ground, 44 rights. The distance that duty put between you and things, and how you could mistake the distance for peace. "I came down," I said. "You did," she said. There were, as she had predicted, questions. The warden had many. The Pack Council, when they convened 3 days later, had more. The lineage scholars who came from the southern territories to verify the mark's authenticity, examining it with the careful thoroughness of people who did not quite believe what they were looking at, had the most of all. I answered every question with the patience of a man who knew that patience was required, and who found, for the first time in 11 years, that patience did not cost him anything, because what he was being patient about was worth it. Saren answered their questions the way she did everything. Directly, without flourish, with the quiet confidence of a woman who had spent 3 years standing in a ring where she was not wanted and had remained entirely herself. Her father, the dire Aldrich, a quiet man with the same steady quality as his daughter and the same indigo-stained hands, came to the keep 3 days after the rite. He had heard by then, as the whole pack had heard. He brought a length of cloth he had dyed himself, wool the color of the winter sky just before dawn, gray-blue and complex. He gave it to Saren, not to me. "I always knew the mark was there," he said to her. "I saw it when you were born, very faint, like a thread of silver in the wool." Saren looked at him. "You never told me." "I told your mother," he said. "She thought it would frighten you." "It might have," Saren said after a moment. "It might have," he agreed. "But it would also have told you that what the pack said was not true." He paused. "I should have told you anyway." Saren was quiet for a moment. Then, "Yes," she said, "you should have." It was the most she said about it. She did not make it large, and she did not make it small. She received it honestly and moved on, which I was beginning to understand was simply how she did things. Honesty without performance. Feeling without theater. I was already entirely devoted to her. I would have been embarrassed about the speed of it if the mark on my wrist had not made speed entirely irrelevant. The bond had decided. My wolf had decided. The rest of me was simply catching up, rapidly and without resistance. The months that followed were what they always are after a bond claim. Full of logistics, of council meetings, of the slow administrative work of bringing a new Luna into the keep's life. Saren approached all of it with the same practical thoroughness she had brought to the dyer's trade. She learned what she needed to learn, she asked when she did not know. She corrected herself when she was wrong without drama, and she had the particular quality of useful people everywhere. She noticed things. Small things, the things that reveal character. She noticed which members of the Pack Council were honest and which performed honesty. She noticed which of the keep staff had been doing their work unseen for years and quietly ensured they were seen. She noticed the places where things could be done better and said so, clearly and without apology, which was either going to endear her to the pack or antagonize them. It endeared her, of course it did. The pack had been waiting, I think, for someone to notice things without being asked. I spoke to Bram and Corvin 6 weeks after the rite. I did it privately in the council room with no witnesses, because the correction of men who have been wrong is not a public event. It is a private one, and a public humiliation would not have served Saren, who had not asked for her stepbrothers to be publicly shamed, only not to be pushed. I told them what I had seen. I told them I had been watching from the high ground. I told them that what they had done casually, without thinking, as many times as they had done it, was the kind of thing that makes a pack smaller, not larger, and that I expected them to understand this, not to perform understanding of it. Bram looked at the floor. Corvin, to his credit, looked at me. "We were wrong," Corvin said. "Yes," I said. "She was always," he stopped. "We didn't." "I know," I said. "You didn't consider it. That is the thing you are going to live with." I paused. "You will apologize to her, not because she needs it, because you need to be the kind of men who say it." They did. Saren received the apology the way she received everything, without excess. She thanked them briefly and did not make them stay in the discomfort longer than was useful. Then she walked away, and I watched her go and thought, this woman has more grace than they deserve and more dignity than they will ever understand, and she is my Luna, and the mark on my wrist knew it before I did. What I remember, from all the months that followed the rite, the council sessions and the scholars and the lineage documentation, and the slow, genuine building of something between two people who had been brought together by an ancient sign, and had then chosen to make it real by the labor of knowing each other, is a morning in late spring. The ceremony ground was green by then, the standing stones ringed with new growth, the bonfire site just a circle of cleared earth. Saren was standing at the edge of it, her back to the keep, her hands in the pockets of her practical coat. The indigo staining was still there. It does not wash out, the mark of her trade, the thing she had been before and would always carry. The silver thread on her wrist was steady and constant beside it. I came to stand beside her. "I think about those 3 years sometimes," she said, without looking at me, "standing in that ring and going home alone." "I know," I said. "I don't regret them," she said. "I want to be clear about that. I regret what my stepbrothers did. I regret that I didn't tell them to stop earlier more clearly. But the 3 years, the standing and believing when the evidence said I shouldn't, I don't regret those." I looked at the ceremony ground. "Why not?" "Because I came back," she said. 3 times I told myself I would not. 3 times I came back. And the 3rd time she stopped, a pause that held something in it. The mark was waiting for the 3rd time. It was always going to be the 3rd time. I thought about what I had been doing those 3 years, watching from the high ground, feeling nothing, governing with patience and distance, and the careful, controlled competence of a man who had confused responsibility for living with the absence of anything that could hurt him. "I was watching," I said. "Every right I was there." "I know," she said. "I should have come down sooner." She looked at me then, finally, with that expression I had learned to recognize, the unguarded one, the one behind the composure. "You came down when the mark told you to," she said. "The mark knew the right moment. We don't get to second-guess the mark." I considered this. "The mark knew before I did," I said. "Yes," she said. "But you listened to it." She turned back to the ceremony ground, quiet for a moment. "That's the part that was yours, the listening." The spring light was on her hands, the indigo staining, the silver thread, 2 different kinds of permanence layered together. I stood beside her in the quiet of the ceremony ground, the pack settling into its morning, the standing stones throwing short shadows in the young sun. The mark on my wrist had been dark for 11 years, and then it had filled with light, and everything had changed. She had come back 3 times, to a ring that did not want her. And the mark had been waiting.